welcome back for the final part of our symposium, an interview with Mr. Tavitian and Frederick Ilchman. Mr. Tavitian was born in Bulgaria and studied at, I'm going to not pronounce this right, Higsian College in Beirut and at Columbia University. Until April 2008, he was Chief Executive Officer of SyncSort, Inc., which he co-founded in 1969. His involvement in this privately held technological company, specializing in the development, marketing, and servicing of generalized infrastructure software products, continues on the board level. As an art collector, Mr. Tavitian favors old master paintings, sculpture from the Renaissance period through late 18th century, English furniture from the 18th century, and Persian rugs. He's also committed to historic preservation, meticulously renovating a townhouse on the Upper East Side in Manhattan, occasionally employing the Frick as a stylistic guide and point of reference, and as you heard before, he is one of our beloved trustees here. Today we have the distinct pleasure of hearing Mr. Tavitian being interviewed by our symposium speaker, Dr. Frederick Ilchman of the Museum of Fine Arts, on his love of art and his different collections and collecting practices. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So we have a portrait of a collector of portraits. So let's start. So this is your home. Tell us a bit about this.
This is my library. The home actually is a townhouse on 79th Street. And that's how I got into collecting. My collection is deemed to be a pretty good, pretty extensive collection. But it was put together in 15 years. And that's an interesting aspect of this collection, that you still can do that. Of course, now it's 15 years later, but it's doable. You just need the money, the eye, and the persistence. So the artwork that I ended up putting together started originally as completely from a decorative perspective. So I had this townhouse, and the townhouse is larger than the typical townhouses. Like the typical townhouse is about 25 feet wide. This one, the property was 50, and the house itself was 35. And so it had a pretty grand architecture with ceiling heights ranging anywhere from 10 to 14 feet. So it was very easy for it to become almost intimidating. So the whole key well, it depends on what you wanted to do with it, but we wanted to make sure that it looked like a home. And the whole key was trying to find a way to warm it up in such a way that it doesn't look as intimidating as it could have. So what you're looking at is what we call it the library. You want me to start talking about some of the paintings?
As you wish. I mean, I'm just noticing that, a few minutes ago we were thinking about Bernini's collection. We had a lot of questions, and now we can finally ask a collector what exactly he has.
Well, I happen to have a painting from Bernini. He was a sculptor and an architect. He was a lot of things, but he also was a painter. Didn't paint that much, but I do have a painting of his brother, and it's an interesting story because there was a woman by the name of Costanza Bonarelli, and Bernini was having an affair. She was married to a guy that worked for Bernini, and Bernini was having an affair with her. And one day he walked into her house, and he found his brother in bed with her. She was a busy woman. She had a husband too. So Bernini pulled his sword, and he almost killed him. The brother ran into a church so that Bernini can't go there with his sword chasing him. Ultimately, the brother managed to escape. But then about a year or so later, he was caught in St. Peter's Basilica sodomizing, and he was thrown in jail. And Bernini would go over and over again to the Pope to try to get him off. And the Pope would listen to Bernini and would say, well, I need a sculpture in my palazzo here and my palazzo there. So he did a lot of free things for the Pope until he finally got him off. And Bernini was a very nasty guy, by the way. They had at the time this habit, I think habit is the right word, of scarring a woman in a particular way, which was not life-threatening, but it indicated that she had been unfaithful. And he sent a bunch of guys that did mark her and tried to throw acid on her as well. So he was a pretty nasty guy. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Let's return to nicer topics. Okay, so in this beautiful house, in your 15 years of collecting, about how long is the largest the collection now? How many pieces do you have?
Between my house here and my house in Massachusetts, I have about 150 paintings and about 130 sculptures.
So, pretty good for 15 years. So we're in one of the great...
That's not what my banker thinks.
So we're in one of the great domestic setting museums in the world, and we're looking at art for domestic settings. Is it fair to say that your collection is, you said, began with a decorator impulse? Is it really for the settings for a home, that kind of scale piece, and that's some kind of subject matter?
I'm sorry.
That you look for art as it will fit in a home.
In a way, yes. And it is true to the extent that I sometimes, even though I refer to myself as a collector, because everybody says I'm a collector, but often I feel that it's a misnomer for me, because what I'm after is creating a certain environment in which I live. And I couldn't care less if I'm missing a particular type of painting in a particular sequence or whatever. So the home, or how the home would look like, becomes the driving force for making the selections of what I buy and what I don't buy.
Okay. So tell us a bit about this room.
This is the drawing room. This is a pretty old picture. I'm sorry, the dining room. By now it has changed on the two sides where you have the two paintings. Now you have four. You have one on top of this one and one on top of the other. So this is the dining room. The painting on the top over the fireplace mantel is by Gandolfi. It's by, and there were three Gandolfis, Ubaldo Gandolfi, Gaetano Gandolfi, and they had a cousin, I forgot his name. But amongst the three, the most successful one was Gaetano Gandolfi, and this is by Gaetano Gandolfi.
But it's saying that you've now changed the appearance of this room suggests, one, that you bought things since this photograph, and that as curator, you move things around.
Well, both. I move things around only because I need space. So I used to pride myself as being very creative in creating space. Otherwise, I don't move things around.
So once it finds its happy place, it
Yes.
tends to stay there. Okay.
Yes.
So this is the Pinamont, these set of chinoiserie panels. So this was an important early acquisition for you.
This was, I believe, the first thing actually that I bought. The first and the second came very close to each other, so I don't even remember which one came first, but I believe that it was this. They are pretty tall. They are about 9 feet, something like that. And in my entry hall, they fit just perfectly. I've had people thinking that I had those made for the entry hall.
Right, when your house was built in the 1750s.
Right, and those are done right, 1756 by Piedmont. And if you take a look at the last one on this side and the second one on the other side, assuming that I'm seeing it correctly, if you compare the two trestles, you can see that one of them is not finished.
And was But if this was your first acquisition, or first or second, you were trying to decorate a section of your house, and you thought, well, might as well start with old master paintings? What was the impulse in the first place?
Well, the impulse on the first place was to, as you said, to decorate the house. But let's just slightly change your question. Why old masters? And I don't know the answer.
So you're 150 paintings deep, and you don't know the answer.
Well, no. Actually, you're right. You're right. I didn't put it right. I know the answer in the sense because that's what I like. But if you ask why do I like old masters, I don't have a good answer for that.
That's an important distinction. Thank you.
Yes.
So let's look at this: the Ubaldo Gandolfi, Sleeping Child.
Okay, this is the second one that I mentioned that came almost at the same time, and this is by Ubaldo Gandolfi, the brother of the one in the dining room. And I also have a painting in Stockbridge by Ubaldo Gandolfi of his wife.
So the Gandolfi connection. Okay.
Yes.
So this is a picture of someone that should look familiar to some of you. This is the well-known art conservator David Bull, and he was, as I understand it, an important influence as you began collecting. So tell us about you and David Bull.
Yeah, well, so as I said, this started as completely from a decorative standpoint. I bought a couple of things, and then I realized that this thing was not going to be very cheap. And being a businessman, I said, okay, we need to have a plan here. And of course, in trying to put together a plan, I came to realize very quickly the obvious, that I just didn't know enough to know how to make the selections and how to go about it. And so I had David to agree to help me. And David brought to my house about 75 or so paintings, transparencies, pictures. When I say paint, yes, I say paintings? I didn't mean paintings, photographs.
Yes.
And we started at the dining room table, and he said, just split them into 3 groups of no, maybe, and no, yes, and maybe. And that's what I did. And we went on. Those were all sorts of mythological landscapes, portraits, you name it. And then I started buying, and somewhere around the 12th or 13th painting is when I realized that 75–80% of my purchases were portraits. In fact, out of these 150 paintings that we talked about, the overwhelming majority are portraits. And I remember the moment when I realized it, and I sat down in the kitchen and I said to myself, okay, why are we buying portraits? My answer at the time, and still is, that I like people, and so that got naturally, you tend to gravitate towards portraits. And when Isabella and I come back from the trip, we take a tour of the house and we talk to them, and sometimes they talk back to me.
Okay, so this is you'd give, then say, a useful piece of advice is to consult with experts as you build a house.
Yes, absolutely. And so David's been extremely helpful to me in, without a doubt, double checking the condition of the painting. He has come to fully grasp what I like and what I don't like. So he would advise me on things, and a lot of the dealers would actually, as the gentleman over here, they would contact him before they contact me. And on the basis that, with the question of, do you think that Aso would like this? The picture on the easel, incidentally, is one of my paintings.
So that's why David is smiling.
Yeah. That's a painting by, oops, yeah. It's a painting by Delacroix. And this was a young man who went to a very well-known boarding school. He won the awards, I forgot what was the year, for the best translation from Latin. And then 2 years later, he got the award, the best award for the best Greek essay. And then a year later, he got another award also. So he was very good. And I happen to have the picture of him when he was like around 80, when he was about 60. He was a very successful guy.
So staying again on the theme of portraits, we now turn to one that is very popular, really a standout in the exhibition right here at the Frick, which is your gorgeous Maroni. So talk about this one. I was just staring at her earlier, and just the amazing asymmetry of her face. It's so closely cropped. You really feel like she's a real person, just in her presence, a foot away. It's quite something, but it's small too.
Yes. A lot of people tend to think that she's the best in the collection. I mean, there are a few that would fight for the title, but a lot of people think that she's the best. She belonged to Cuba's ambassador to the United States when Castro took over. So this was the guy that represented Batista in the United States. He obviously couldn't go back. And then, and so Castro took over in 1961. And so in 1962, this guy, I forget his name, I know his name, had to sell some of the possessions that he had because he had, had to develop some sort of source of income. And that's when he sold it. And the dealer I bought it from, he bought it at that time and put it in their vault. And it came back about 10 years ago. He brought it up, so it had never been on the market. And the Met was really upset. They thought it should go to the Met.
I can think of a few more museums that are upset, actually. But it's an extraordinary piece. It has a lot of power, and also, unlike the famous Maroni portraits in London, it's not well known except for guests at your home. So it's nice. She can make her New York debut this way. So extraordinary piece, and then going on. So another Maroni, right? And maybe is Ottaviani.
Right, and this is almost determined but not complete that it is Isotta Brambati. And Isotta Brambati is the second wife of the man in pink, who is one of Maroni's best known.
No, the man in pink. I mean, that's quite a suit, I gotta say.
And then I'll just go on a quick tangent to tell you a story that I think everybody will enjoy. I get often asked for people to come and see the collection. And sometimes I'm not there because I happen to know the people, but they come from an institution, etc. And I want to do this for them, and I'm not there. On one of those occasions, one of the trustees was part of the people that visited the collection, and I wasn't there. And she was here when the Maroni show was open, but I was not there because we were out of the country. And she was talking to our architect, and she told her that, she said, I didn't even know that there was an artist by the name of Maroni until I saw her in Aso's bedroom. And the architect looked at her and said, what the hell were you doing in Aso's bedroom?
So the display of private art in private homes. Anyway, congratulations on having two beautiful portraits in this exhibition. And, okay, now, Parmigiano. I think we're going up a level in a way.
Sorry?
We may be going up a level?
Yes. The Parmigiano is, as far as I know, it's the only portrait by Parmigiano in the United States, museums or private collections. Parmigiano young died when he was 37, as a lot of geniuses did. So there isn't that much work from him. Somebody died in the UK, and this was found in the attic. They didn't know what they had. There was a hole in the upper right corner, and I had the opportunity to buy it. And it's, but when I bought the Parmigianino, I meant to check this, but I didn't have the time to do it. I think that it's value. I do not mean to imply that quality and value are completely in parallel, but of course it's affected. So the cost of this when I bought it was probably about 3 times the most expensive painting I had before that. So this kind of jumped me on a different level, and that's how I look at the Parmigianino. I said earlier that most people think that the Maroni is the best in the collection. Isabella would argue that the Parmigianino is the best, right?
So then purchasing this portrait made maybe you even take your own collection more seriously. I mean, it's now there's a level of quality and probably prominence that it didn't have before.
Possible, although I think that I was already taking my collection seriously. My banker was heavily into drinking by then.
Okay, so be it. So now you've had portraits for which you don't know the name of the sitter, but you also have portraits for which you don't know the name of the artist. And this is more probably a head study than a portrait, but this, all we have is Italian unknown artist. So tell us about this work.
This has an interesting story. As you can tell, all the portraits, all the paintings I have stories behind them. This was, again, somebody died on the West Coast, and it was Sotheby's that this was put in. And it was characterized as from the school of Raphael. And I have to give you the numbers here so that you can grasp the point I'm trying to make. It was estimated somewhere between $16,000 to $18,000 or something like that. Didn't know who it was by, didn't know who it was, didn't know the timing. But everybody, all the dealers, there was a lot of buzz around this one, and everybody thought that this was by somebody, well-known painter. And so, estimated between 16 to 18,000. Ultimately, as the bidding went on, I was the only non-dealer left in the game, and I ended up paying $800,000 for it. Which gives you what? But all these guys were banking on the fact that at some point they'll identify who it is by, and that would, give you a chance to make some money on it.
But even not knowing the artist, tell us why you like this.
Oh, I like first of all the portrait. I think she's absolutely beautiful. I think I actually like the fact that we don't know who she is. I'm not sure that I really want to find out.
So tell us a bit about the mechanics in your collecting. You mentioned dealers, auctions. How do you typically work in terms of research, lead time, decision making, etc.?
Well, at this point, I get contacted by auction houses or dealers, and strangely enough, they start with exactly the same sentence. I've got something that's got your signature on it. It's like as if they've all gone to the same school. And probably 60 to 70% they go to David Bull, and some of the others will contact me directly, and I don't care which way it goes. And then it depends. If it's an auction, Then I do my homework. I'm very good at doing my homework. I'm very good at deciding how much should be spent, and I don't want to.
So you give yourself a top price.
Right, but I would not go crazy with the price. It just has to be the right price.
Except for her.
Except, well, no, I'm not. I don't remember what went through my mind at that time. But obviously, my approach has evolved because she was pretty much. She was probably 2005, something like that. So she was fairly early in the thing. Now, when I go to an auction, I know exactly what I'm going to do.
So you have a top bid or a final bid, and then
Right.
premium or
Right.
something.
Right.
Okay, and so when you're not with an auction, when you're working with a dealer, how does that operate?
With a dealer, again, I would do my homework. In most cases, I actually don't negotiate. I tell them what I'm prepared to pay, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm not married to it. And I think I've lost only one. But I try to be, in my own mind, at least fair. I mean, they've got to make some profit on it, obviously.
Great. So now this is Giorgio Carpi, but now a very famous sitter, Bindo Altaviti, right? The beautiful banker, right? Famously portrayed by Cellini and as a young man by Raphael. So tell us about this portrait.
I think, if you put the other one first. Okay.
There's the Raphael.
This is obviously a cover of a book, and it is a painting by Raphael of Bindo Altaviti, who was a banker in Florence. He inherited the bank from his father when he was like around 20, and he was very successful. Financed the Pope and all that, and he did very well. So he's been to Altaviti, now we can go back. And that's him at the age of around 50. You can tell what 30 years of banking will do to you. And the first thing I should do is that when I bought this, it was not clear who this was by, although the consensus was it was Girolamo Carpi. And in the last few months, it's been changed to Salviati. So Keith, Philip Costamagna, Carlo Falciani, Davide Gasparato, they all have agreed that it is Salviati. Either one is okay as far as I'm concerned.
Probably an upgrade, actually. So
perhaps somewhat like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the heaviest painting I have. It weighs about 150 pounds because it's on marble. And Bindo Altaviti owned a franchise portion of Hadrian's villa in Rome. And it is possible that this came from there, and that's why it's on marble.
Spectacular. And so there's your book cover. Okay, now, so think about self-portraits. You turned out to have 6 self-portraits in your collection. That's
Apparently, yes.
on last count.
Yes. Well, the first one is Frank Elaine. Nothing much to say there other than most people have not heard of Frank Elaine. And everybody loves it. It's very romantic, as you can see. And the second one is Viand, and he had something like around 6, 7 self-portraits, all in different costumes. And at one time in his life, he spent some time in Indonesia, and probably that's where the concept or the idea of having a self-portrait with the turban came from.
Now, is this a category you'd like to expand? Would you like more self-portraits, for example?
I don't care.
Fair enough. Okay. So, moving on. Okay, now this is the next one. These next 4 slides, or these 4 works, kind of function together and tell a kind of intricate story about several generations. So, will you tell us about these?
Yes, the one on the left is from the workshop of Roger van der Weyden, and the sitter himself is known as Anthony of Burgundy, or the Great Bastard of Burgundy. And he was the son of Philip the Good, and Philip the Good was the Duke who ran the Duchy of Burgundy, and he's the one who called Joan of Arc and turned her to the Brits. What this man is wearing is the chain is the insignia of the Order of the Golden Fleece. This was an order that Philip the Good started, and he was in fact the number 29 added to that order. These were a group of knights who they were above the law. So they decided amongst themselves if somebody did something wrong, that the person had done something wrong, and what the punishment should be. And I suppose one should mention that Anthony of Burgundy, or the Bastard of Burgundy, he was one of 18 illegitimate children of Philip the Good from 26 recorded mistresses.
So Philip the Good lover, right?
Yeah. Now, Philip the Good's other son, his full son, was Charles the Bald. And Charles the Bald and Philip the Good died, I think in 1467 or something like that. Charles the Bald inherited the Duchy of Burgundy, and Anthony of Burgundy was, you'll understand in a minute why I'm telling you all this. Anthony of Burgundy was very loyal to him. He was a very good military commander, and he helped him expand the duchy and all that. And then in 1477, Charles the Bald was killed in the Battle of Nancy. And the person who took over the duchy was his daughter, Mary of Burgundy, and that's her. She was 19 years old. The Duchy of Burgundy was very rich at the time, full with arts and all sorts of things. And she was considered to be the richest and most eligible young woman in Europe. She ultimately married the Archduke of Austria, who later on became Emperor Maximilian. And
No, she didn't have a good end though herself.
right, she started very well in the sense that she put her foot down that she was not going to be married by geopolitical considerations. She picked the guy that she wanted, and she had a very happy marriage. But when she was around 25, she liked riding, and she was in hunting party, and the horse tripped, and she was thrown out, and the horse fell on her, broke her back, and then a week later she died. And she had had one daughter before this happened, and that's the woman that ultimately became Margaret of Austria. And that's the woman on the left. And I love the fact that I have the two mother and daughter in my dining room looking at each other in a way. And Margaret of Austria, this painting, we don't know who it was painted by. But we do know that it did belong to Konrad Adenauer at one time, the Chancellor of Germany. And Margaret of Austria had a small painting, the one that you see on the right, which is about maybe 6 or so inches wide and maybe 8 or so inches high. It was a personal, devotional piece that she carried with her as she traveled. So, as Frederick mentioned, those 4 paintings connect to each other.
And that, that's the essence of a collection, that it's more than the sum of its parts, that it tells a broader story.
And if any one of you has a painting of Charles the Bald, I'll be happy to talk to you.
So, moving ahead, okay, so Brunswick monogrammist, so this is a painting of a young boy pulling up a dog. So you want to talk about this? What is this?
Okay, this is a 16th century Flemish painting. It's nothing spectacular as a painting. But there's a gentleman by the name of David Excursion who is...
There he is.
Yeah, right there. He's an art historian from the UK. And the story I'm telling you is probably 10 years ago, something like that. David was here giving a lecture at the Frick, actually. And he was staying with us in our townhouse. And David and I, at this particular moment, we were in the kitchen and I was making coffee. And David was going, it was summer, and it was at the time when the auction houses had the catalogs. And David was going through the Christie's catalog and made some derogatory comments about the young people at Christie's that they didn't know what they're supposed to know. And so I came, after I made the coffee, I went to him and said, David, what are you talking about? So he pointed, there was a full page picture of that 16th century Flemish, of this one. Okay? So he pointed out this to me, and again, keep in mind, 16th century Flemish. And he said, this is based on a sculpture. They should have known that, and they should have included it. So I looked at him and I said, David, I have the sculpture. He said, what do you mean you have the sculpture? And this is a sculpture, 16th century, from Padua. And you see it's the composition. The boy has stolen the puppy, and the dog wants the puppy back. Now this is a composition that has become very successful, successful since then. And you find it in wood, marble, ivory, and here's a copy of 19th century copy in ivory that I have.
Right there, around the
Yes.
the bedpost.
Yes.
So again, another story, a single motif being seen over generations and in different media. So that must be very satisfying.
Yes.
But another way that because you like these connections, because you own that sculpture, you had to buy the painting, right?
Yes, precisely. Absolutely right. Otherwise, I would not have bought that painting. Yeah.
So again, that's, so now we can all say that we've seen this in Aso's bedroom. Okay, now this is a picture when you were talking about this, we chatted on the phone a few days ago, and this is an example of one that got away, right? It's a portrait, it's beautiful, it's in oil and copper, Franz Hals. So what happened?
No, but well, I would not characterize this got away. But let me tell you the story. This was a painting that this is on copper, first of all, and it's probably about 6-7 inches wide and 8 to 9 inches high. So it's a small painting. And this was put for an auction in London by Sotheby's. And typically when a painting is being put in an auction in London, before the auction, a month, 2 months before, they bring it to New York so that potential New York collectors like myself and museums could take a look at it and perhaps decide to buy it. So I was called by Sotheby's. I was told that they had a painting that had my signature on it. And indeed, I really liked the painting. I did not know at the time who it belonged to. Somebody I happened to know. But I asked Sotheby's, they would go and contact the person and see if I could buy the painting outside the auction.
Directly, yeah.
So they went and checked, but the fellow didn't want to do that, and it went for an auction. Okay, I'll have to give you some of the numbers, but I'm making up slightly the numbers because I don't remember exactly what they were. But let's say that I think that it was estimated somewhere around 1.2 to 1.5, something like that, million pounds, because it was in London. Okay? And I thought, and actually another data point that I should give you is that when I buy at the auction, I'm never there. I never bid on from the floor. I'm always in front. So about 1.2, 1.4, something like that. This was the estimate. And I was in my hotel room, and I decided that this thing would go to probably about 2 million. I was prepared to do that. And I was prepared to do a little more than that, maybe as much as 2.5. And this is something that was going to decide depending on the feeling that I got of how things are moving in the auction room. Well, so it kept going, and the guy from Sotheby's, George Walker, head of the Old Masters, he was bidding for me. I was in my hotel room in London, and all of a sudden there was just silence, nothing was happening. I said, George, what's happening? He said, well, the other guy must have reached his limit, so he was calling his patron to see if he can go higher. Meaning, whoever was bidding against me, it was not him, but he had somebody bidding for him. And he was in contact with this person, so this person had reached his maximum, and he just wanted to know whether he can go high. So it stopped, and all of a sudden I realized that the last bid was £4 million. Come on. So I was almost ready to get on my knees and pray for another bid. But sure enough, another bid did come. And the person who bought it is another collector in New York. And then we figured all this out a few weeks later, and he insisted that we have a picture with the two of us holding the painting together.
But so he has the Franz Halls and not you.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
And has this experience changed the way you approach auctions? Because you did not plan to get to 4.
I was not planning to go to 4. God, no, it doesn't change because the fact that I went over my own set limit was an aberration. And as I said, I'm usually pretty disciplined. This time, I don't know. Must have been something with the weather in London.
So now, your collection was made to create in your home an ambiance that you enjoyed, that gave you visual pleasure, reflection, etc. But what's it like to see your own art on view someplace else, even in an institutional context, like here at the Clark in 2011?
Yeah, very interesting, actually. This is the Clark put an exhibit on something like around 33 or so of my paintings. And so for the first time I saw them in a totally different environment. Because in your home, they're supported by the furniture, the rugs, the moldings, all the other things that go in the room. Wallpaper, you name it. Okay? Here, it's very stark. They're all at eye level. while at your home. Some of them are high, some of them are low. And I remember that my immediate reaction when I first saw it was, it's exactly the words that I used, that they were out of context. But that was not intended to mean negatively, because in fact you saw the paintings much better, but it was really an experience for me.
And I also imagine different walls, different lighting.
Yes.
Different juxtapositions.
Right. Correct.
And there's another nice one. There's the Maroni right there, and the Parmigianino. It's quite a wall, right? Did you consult on the wall colors, or was the first that you saw this?
For this?
Yeah.
No, that was entirely up to them.
Okay.
I had nothing to do with how they positioned it. I think they did keep me informed, but this was the time I was a trustee of the Clark. The curators that did this, I had a great deal of respect for them. I have no concerns.
That's kind of interesting, though, to take the art that you live with and let someone else present it. It's an act of faith.
That is true.
Well, this one turned out pretty happily. There you see another one. There's some of your Netherlandish works, including the Haraja right there. Quite spectacular. This and another one of self-portraits. Right?
Yes, the Frank Lane. Yes.
Okay. And thought we might end with a portrait, but not a painted portrait, but a sculpted one. So this very beautiful Udon. This, you told me, is one of your absolute favorites. Why?
As a sculpt, well, I think that it's the surface of the bust, and it's actually really beautiful when you stand in front of it. I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful sculpture.
Who is the sitter?
The sitter is somebody known as Petite Elly, and this particular sculpture was also at an exhibit at the Frick a couple of years ago or something like that. Her sort of claim to fame is she came from a not very well-to-do aristocratic family, did not have the money for a dowry, and the king decided to give her the money so she can get married. And apparently when she was told that she was given the dowry money, she apparently just posed and said, okay, now I have the dowry, where's the husband?
And so this one, so it's the surface, it's the marble as a medium that you love about this, the expression.
Right, all of the above, all of the above. I mean, she's just a beautiful young lady.
What's not to like, right?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Just gorgeous.
And if you see, we don't have a shot at it, but if you look at it from the back, the way that ribbon is tied in the back, it is spectacular the way he's done the marble.
So virtuosity in the execution, the craftsmanship is also something that you like.
Yes.
What is the latest thing chronologically in your collection? How late do you go into the 19th century?
Yeah, I have a few things that are in the beginning of the 19th century.
But nothing later 19th or 20th?
No.
That's fine. Also, the interviewee is quite an opera fan, and he said that his two favorite composers are Verdi up here, and then Puccini trailing by a bit. And I asked you the other day when we were chatting, well, who's your Verdi as an artist, and who's your Puccini? You want to try that?
Well, first thing I should say is that I do have a sculpture of Verdi by Janita. And he happens to be in the kitchen, even though Verdi was not a good cook. I'm sorry, I got it.
No, is that of all the artists, either in your collection or outside, who's your Verdi of visual arts? One that you just love so deeply as an artist, who maybe has the versatility or the range or the drama of Verdi.
Independent of whether I own.
Yeah.
I would probably say Raphael.
That's, I think, for the sort of the grandeur of the subject matter and the perfection. That's a nice analogy.
Yeah.
Well, this sculpture and clearly these wonderful stories that we've been hearing, I think we're at a good place to end. We're very grateful, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, might we have a few questions from the audience for Mr. Tavitian?
Thank you. I thought this was wonderful. The leitmotif that runs obviously through your collection is people.
Yes.
Obviously, that's what attracts you, seems to attract you more, is the varying faces and personalities of people. Is that just something that came naturally to you, or is it something that you decided you wanted to do?
Well, you are absolutely correct. And I didn't finish a talk that I started some time ago when I was 20 minutes ago or something. The fact that, if you recall, I mentioned that at one point I came to realize that I was buying portraits. It was not that I said up front that I will buy portraits, okay? But once I realized I was doing this, obviously it begs the question, why? Why is it that? And the answer, I believe in my case, is because I like people. So there's no question that that is what is driving the motif that you put your finger on.
Anyone else? Another question?
I had a question about the Hall's portrait. How do we know who the sitter is and who was he?
Well, remember that the Hall's portrait I didn't get. Okay? I do not know who the sitter is, and I don't know whether that's known or not. My guess is probably known. Yeah, I don't know.
We had a question in the front row.
I was wondering if you've ever bought any painting or sculpture that you hadn't actually seen. And also, I noticed you have some beautiful antiques in your home. And do you get as much pleasure, or I hope at least some pleasure, out of collecting the antiques as you do the paintings and sculpture?
Well, the answer to the second question is definitely. I mean, we've talked about the paintings and the sculpture, but I do buy quite a bit of decorative arts as well. I have a collection of 18th century English furniture, which I absolutely like, and I have a collection of some very good Persian rugs that I also like. And what was the first part of your
Have you
question?
bought?
You insist on seeing every piece
Oh.
that you purchase
In person.
before you
Or have you bought things
Well,
on the basis of only the photographs?
I have sometimes bought things that are subject to me seeing it after I get it in my hands. Like there is an art fair, Tefaf in Maastricht, and I buy there fairly often, and typically I may have already made a deal subject to within the first half an hour, David would go check the condition, David Bull, and that I will reassure myself that I like it from an aesthetic standpoint.
said that you started collecting for decoration and not to fill certain gaps, but we've also seen a few instances where, in fact, you've collected the Burgundy series or the little boy with the dog. Has accomplishing that changed the way you approach collecting? Are you now more interested in creating those kinds of juxtapositions?
It is probably fair to say that I'm more interested in that now, but simply because I've learned more, and I would have never, it would never occur to me that you could get these 500-year-old paintings, four of them spanning across Europe, and that you find a connection between them that would turn you on. I just wasn't aware that that kind of thing would turn me on. Now that I know, as I said, I'm serious. If you got a portrait of Charles the Bold, we should talk.
What do you put on your walls when you're lending your paintings to the exhibitions?
Well,
If this were an Italian museum, there'd be a little postcard.
it's not that difficult these days because you typically lend one or two or three. But when we did the exhibit at the Clark, there was about 33 paintings. And I think that 30 of them probably came from New York, the other 3 from Massachusetts. Okay? So my house looked like it could be burglarized. But with so many of them to move, you can't replace them. But for 1, 2, 3, it's okay because I have a few that I haven't found yet the space to hang them, so I can do something.
Do you find that you miss the paintings after a while when they're out being loaned? Do you personally miss any of them or all of them?
I think you asked for the back after the exhibition, right?
I miss the people in those paintings. Yes.
Have you ever changed your mind about a purchase and sold it?
Change and then sold it?
Changed your mind and then, got rid of it, sold it.
Frederick asked me yesterday or the day before as to whether there is one thing that I regret not buying. And yes, I think there is only one. There were a pair of bronze heads about this big. They were absolutely, this was very beginning in the collection. And if I had them, there was one place that they would have to go in the house. That was fairly clear, to me at least at the time. It was in the entry hall, and I thought that it turned the house a little bit too museum-like. And as you recall, at the beginning at least, I think that I've learned how to deal with it now, but the big drive was to make sure that as you bring all this art and you decorate the house, etc., you don't make it intimidating. And those two at the time, I was concerned that they would, in fact, cross that line. They wouldn't have. Okay? And in fact, if they were to come in the market now, I would buy them. But the Prince of Liechtenstein got ahead of me.
Thank you so much for answering our questions. I just have 2 for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you endeavor to try and display your collection as much as possible? And by which I mean, how much of your collection is on display versus how much of it is in storage? And also, what do you see as the future for your collection?
I don't have. I may have something like 5, 6 paintings in storage, but they're just waiting to be hung. I don't. That's to some extent why I said I'm not your typical collector. In that, I mean, to me, the objective is to affect the ambiance of my house, and once that's done, then that's it. I have never. I sold only one painting. Actually, it's a long story, but I don't sell paintings that I buy. I don't have anything in storage to speak of. In terms of displaying them, I feel a certain sense of obligation to provide them to the public. I'm not looking for it. It's a headache for me. Every time we have this thing, it costs me legal fees. So I'd rather not do it. But I don't think you can take some of these kind of paintings and just sit on them. It's just not that.
Did I understand correctly? You said you had a painting by Bernini's brother? Or
No, painting by Bernini of his brother.
Oh, okay.
He's written a biography.
There's one.
To be
There's
continued.
one that's believed to be. Is this the one in the Bernini catalogs that we see?
Oh, it has been. In
Published.
fact, it was exhibited in.
Okay, I know which one it is then.
Yeah.
It's not proven that it's his brother's, but it certainly could be. Yes, thank you.
I don't think there's any doubt.
Well, how do we don't know what he looked like except for the painting, and it's not in the documentation.
You said your collection, if I got it right, began as a form of decoration. Does 79th Street have a sort of citified collection and the house in Stockbridge more country items, or could both collections switch over from Stockbridge to Manhattan, 79th Street, and be equally at home?
No, I, for a reasonably long time, I tried to keep, I thought of the Massachusetts component of the collection, of being, I'm going to say of lower quality, but I really don't mean lower quality.
Naive.
Yeah, I mean, not as defined as what I have here. Now, it has become, and actually, there's one portrait I have that you would enjoy. And that's a very large portrait of by Julia Romana. It's of Alexander the Great. And it is a portrait that's extremely strong. I mean, I really, if you got somebody in commission to have them paint something that exudes strength and power, can't do any better job. So it was really, and it's a big painting. And it was with a dealer in London, and this was the time I used to go to London on business once a month. And I always would stop and admire this painting, but I couldn't cross the line of going for it. He also had a picture of Bronzina. He also had a picture of Bronzina of Christ. And actually, let me just skip the details. But the painting from Julia Romana ended up being in New York. The dealer had sent it so that David, my restorer, can clean it. And since David was only a few blocks away, I said, why don't we bring you in and take a look at it? So we put it in my study in the city and just killed it. Absolutely, there are about 11, 12 paintings in my study. We just destroyed them all. Then I put them up in the put it up in the library, and I thought maybe, and I have a good friend, a Dutchman, whose judgment I trust, and Theo happened to be at home. And I said, Theo, take a look at this. What do you think? So Theo looked at it. He said, oh, he said, Mussolini would have loved it.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions.
Yes, this is a philosophical / psychological question. I'm wondering if collecting paintings and sculptures has changed your life. I don't mean to be intrusive, but I'm thinking of Dostoevsky, who says that mankind perishes without beauty. And I wonder if you look back in your life before you collected, before you got familiar with art, and you look at yourself now, have you changed as a human being? We change as we listen to great music and as we read great literature. And I know for myself, I've changed by looking at art.
Good question. Well, certainly it affects how I look at things. Just absolutely no. It affects how I look at things. And no issue about that. Has it changed me? I'm not exactly sure, because before I got into this, I was 110% business. The only time that my mind would switch off is during the opera. And even there, the intermission, when I would go straight back to where I was dealing with. I apologize. So, I think it definitely affects him. It cannot not affect him. I mean, just the beauty of it and everything else that you see there is just clearly there.